G'day, how are you, Nina?
Good, thanks, Andrew. How are
It's
you?
not true, is it? You're fatigued.
I think we both have a condition called like survivalism or something, where we're just living till the next
That's
holiday.
the next holiday, Christmas. Can Christmas please come?
It's going too slowly.
But I reckon it's interesting in our client group out there. It's a tough time out in the real world, and I think we're feeling it too. You know, the level of when you look at the files that are coming in, they're crunchy files, people in conflict. Everyone's been trying to manage stuff.
Yeah,
These times create difficult problems.
yeah, emotions running very high.
And when you're tired, and I think everyone I talk to is like you and I, and they're going,
over it.
how many days left? 47 days till Christmas. Is that right, Nina?
No, until on my holiday. You've got to wait longer.
Damn, only 47. All right. Well, look, our topic today is going to be called Culture is King, and we'll talk a little bit later about the Channel 9 farrago that's been running out in front of the media for the last 3 or 4 months. But I want you to keep that as a bit of a lens about what we're talking about, because once again, we're seeing a heightened distillation by the Fair Work Commission about what good investigations look like, what is bad behaviour, what's not bad behaviour, what is process. So what we've tried to do today is to line up for you process so you can start to see what happens when process fails. I think some of these decisions are pretty poor, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, a bit thin.
And I don't think they're enormously helpful, but it's a bit like the workers' compensation. The fact that it's a completely flawed jurisdiction in workers' compensation doesn't mean it doesn't affect your premium. So you've got to know where the risk sits. And the Fair Work Commission at the moment, an investigation that doesn't have good process has a high chance of failure. Whereas 5 years ago,
they would let it pass.
A rough and ready process which had a just outcome would always triumph. That's not the case at the moment. So
yeah, I think it's really showing that they're focused on what is good, and they're going to make sure that's the most important thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Look, we might start off though with some union officials behaving badly, because I reckon that's always a bit of fun, really, isn't it? Imagine there's two times the union officials come on the site, stirring up the subcontractors,
and
to stop work,
to stop work.
so they can put pressure on the lead contractor
to get rid of a project manager, not because of safety issues,
just to get rid of someone,
just to pressure them into doing something the union wanted.
No surprise, the union and the two officials lost.
Yeah, union got hit with 131,000, and I think the officials got 15 each.
Yeah. Anyway, so look,
because they had no right to do that. They weren't HSRs or anything.
I know, and this is pre the crackdown on the CFMEU, but it does show that the world is changing. That there is the courts and the community are starting to look at union officials and their bad behaviour, and they're starting to say it's got to stop. And for those of you who deal with difficult conflict-driven union officials, there's a level of comfort in this, in acting in the right way. So I thought, why don't we stick it down, make you have a giggle, make you realise the world is changing. It's not a bad thing to know. All right, what have we got next?
Unfair dismissal, where an employee had been there for a really long period of time.
Oh, yeah. This one
was really silly, I thought.
Yeah, this is some mud and phosphate resources, isn't it? And this is a case of a guy who's nearly my age, who's been working for this, pretty old.
Yeah, I think he's 62.
Yeah, not quite as old as me, but still old, and been working for about 20 years.
Unblemished history.
Yeah, although quite clearly had behaved in the way that he was criticised for doing throughout his entire workplace. And I suspect so have many other people. And I want to put that shade context, on where we are, in context where we are. Anyway, his employment was terminated.
Yeah, because he was making inappropriate comments about genitalia and hand gestures.
Yeah, doing all that. So all the sort of stuff which, if he'd been employed 2 days and did it in a professional workplace, not in a tough industry, would be proper grounds for serious misconduct. I got to tell you, when you've got a person who's historically done the same thing for a number of times and never got into trouble, most properly convened courts would go, you've got an issue of condemnation.
Yeah, and that'd be harsh.
Yeah.
But the focus on this case was the fact that although they had policies and procedures on it, the fact that he hadn't been trained properly and he didn't know about his obligations meant that he was harsh amongst the consideration of his unblemished history, which I think is silly, because it's obviously what he did was wrong, and it shouldn't be that you had to be trained that it's wrong. It's 2024.
Yeah, I think, the question, it agitates this issue. If Nina comes in and punches me because she hasn't read the policy,
or not been trained on it.
Yeah, haven't been trained. I don't think that's going to cut it. And I think there is a cultural sense that there are some things now which are just taboo doing. So sexualized commentary, vulgarity, those types of things. Now, and that's the nub of this problem in this case. And I suspect it's what the DP just was trying to say but couldn't find the right language to say it, and end up focusing on policies because it was easier. The reality is this was a workplace which I suspect had condoned this behaviour from this person and many others. And at the end of the day, probably there was no proper argument run around condemnation that should have been done or for evidence led. So he fell upon this play of saying, well, how could this person who's been there this long, unblemished history, never been trained, know it was wrong? It is just a nonsense, but it was his easy way, or his or her easy way out of a problem which I suspect the proper issues hadn't been agitated.
Yeah.
But what does come from it is this does form another judgment that goes towards process.
Yeah.
And this idea that if you say something's wrong and it's documented as being wrong, but you don't train and make the person competent, you're then powerless to actually deal with it.
I think in this case it was a tick and flick, so there was no genuine consultation or training on it.
Yeah.
So definitely follow all your procedures and stuff, but I still think that shouldn't be the difference.
No, I think it's an underwhelming judgment, but I do think that there is a history inside the case that's actually heard that suggests this was a hard one to get around. I suspect condemnation was really the issue. But the next case, we're off again with investigations, which is
it was a very
Panchel and Bulla mushrooms.
Rushed process.
Yeah, so this was somebody who was terminated, allegations were made against them 24 hours and they were out, weren't they?
Yeah, something like they made 8 allegations of like racial misconduct. And then they got an opportunity to respond. Then I think pretty much within the 24 hours, they responded, found out it was substantiated, had to respond to the show cause and was terminated. And that was the fastest process.
Well, it's efficient, I think you could say that. But I think what came out of this once again is that you don't have a proper allegations-based letter, nor do you have evidence collected properly against it.
Yeah, there was no evidence of the allegations that they could bring. So they said it was to do with like labour hire workers who weren't comfortable providing the evidence, but it was very thin. And then also denied.
Scant, I think was the word.
Yeah. And also I think they requested for additional time and that was rejected as well.
Yeah. But
crazy.
Part of this judgment, which is DP Coleman's judgment, goes back to saying, and this is very hard for employers to look at and say, well, look, there's not even any really, he started talking about hearsay and a whole lot of things. Pretty unhelpful, seeing that's not what the evidential rules are within the commission. But he said, this hearsay, it's impressionistic. He's absolutely right, but it's a very difficult thing for an employer to do, because what Nina and I look for is what is admissible evidence, not because that's required in the Fair Work Commission, but it's the highest standard of evidence. So what is the direct evidence of what occurred? What did someone see? Was there an email? Was there CCTV? Why do we go there? Well, if you're going to provide proper procedural fairness, you provide what is the evidence that a person can see and respond to, and you can't respond to impressions. Nina says, Andrew's just rude to me all the time. Well, it's possibly true. I don't think I am, but it's possibly true. But the answer is, how could I ever respond to that? Because I don't know on what day, what is this I said. I have no context upon which I can even give alibi evidence and say, well, actually, I wasn't there the day she says I was rude to her. So this case, again, elevates this issue of the quality of evidence collection investigations. So I don't want you to feel you've got to be a lawyer, but I want you to think a bit like a lawyer. What is the evidence which is first-hand evidence? What I saw, what I said, what that person said to me, who is the wrongdoer, CCTV, emails. Go to your best quality evidence first.
Yeah.
Then step down to the next layer. But don't start acting when you don't have good first-person evidence.
Yeah, you should always go back and test them and ask for more detail.
I think so too. Qantas, I think
everyone's heard about this case.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend a lot of time other than I think out of the expression, we've got a cunning plan come through in the background of this. It's in the middle of COVID. Let's just get this done.
Yeah,
and the creation,
that was very clear.
Yeah, and the creation of documents for the subterfuge was really obvious. and that's what's come out, and that's why the penalties are so high. And the other part is, there's significant damage that has been done to people.
Yeah, they got psychiatric illnesses as a result, I think.
Yes, so $100 million plus for Qantas for sleight of hand, not a great idea. For me, good to read more about what occurred in this case. Remember, no matter what your decisions, COVID was a very hard time because decisions had to be made about people you keep and don't keep. The test of leadership is always what you do in hard circumstances, not what you do in easy circumstances. And if you looked at what sat behind this was not good leadership.
No.
This was taking an advantage of a circumstance in a manner which was inappropriate.
Yeah.
And to your own people, that is a terrible thing to do because you will not be trusted. And Qantas's reputation.
Yeah, it's just taken a nosedive.
Well, this is about the third case they've been cleaned up on during COVID where they sought to take advantage of COVID.
Yeah.
And there was reasons they could have done everything they did during COVID because it hit airlines harder than it hit anybody else. So there was good reasons, but don't be sneaky.
Yeah. And I think, to the reputational point, it's just a reminder that it's not just money. I think Qantas is huge. They can probably afford this penalty. But right now, with the current climate, their reputation's just taken another dive. Everyone was focused on the supermarkets and Qantas was doing relatively well. But now it's just killed them again.
All right. Now we've got another case, haven't we? Which is right in the corner, which is the application by one. Yeah, this is a guy who was moved in a role,
and he wasn't happy about
it. Rang in sick to the wrong person. They said, "Look, did you ring the right person?"
Well, it's because he actually followed the processes. So he lodged that he was taking time off, but because the system hadn't changed his manager. His old manager got the reminder, and his old manager was like, "Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you tell your new manager?" And he cracked it.
He did crack it.
Yeah, and he was like, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing this," and alleged all these other things, and I think swore at them a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they directed him to attend a disciplinary meeting about failure to comply with lawful reasonable direction. So he went on stress leave and filed a stop bullying order.
Yeah. And the stop bullying order related to the fact that they asked him to report to the right manager. Anyway, you'd be surprised to learn that the application for bullying failed.
Yes.
But I do think, and the reason I put this case in is not because it's the thinnest case of bullying I've ever seen, but it is. It is because what we're seeing is people who feel marginalised and hurt starting to use some of the tools that we've not seen used commonly. So this is the third bullying order application that we've dealt with in the last 4 weeks.
Like that workers' comp one.
Yeah. So, and yet in the years before this, you rarely heard or saw them reach determination. So I think that tells us one thing. Whether anyone wants to talk about it or not, we're on the verge of a recession. People are vulnerable. People are scared. They will reach for their remedies. So we will see an increase in the use of bullying orders, sexual harassment orders, things where aggrieved people wish to put a line in the sand to protect themselves.
Even dispute applications, I think.
Yeah. All right. So where are we now? We are on to this is a case of the Royal District Nursing Service where their enterprise agreement process was found to be failed after the AMFU and I don't know who the UWU are. Who are they? Anyway, they're another union.
United Workers Union.
Yeah, God, I keep forgetting them, changing names, don't I? But they said, look, this vote's been put up based on information that you've provided.
Yeah, it was approved by 53%.
Yeah, and when we look at what you represented, some of it is simply not true.
Oh, yeah.
And some of it is definitely misleading. So terms were characterised as new terms and beneficial when in fact they were terms that
existed already
and weren't good for them. So there was this whole process of recharacterising, and therefore putting a gloss on truth to get people to vote. And not surprisingly...
But I think the worst thing that they did was they told everyone they were going to get a increase. And because of the delays in negotiation with the Fair Work Commission annual increase, it meant that some of the people wouldn't get any increase. They would just get the award. But they didn't tell them that, and they didn't tell people what their classifications were going to be. And when they were questioned about this at the commission, said, after the Fair Work Commission approved, we were going to tell people.
Yeah. Anyway, once again, for those who practice to deceive, there is always a nasty outcome. Can I say there is a simple process that you do in a negotiation, which Nina and I regularly tutor people in, which is after each negotiation, you set up a table, which is what has been agreed, what has not been agreed, what is the difference between past and present. So people are presented in a palatable form based on their language, skill, a very simple document that shows the changes, pluses and minuses that are being argued. So it's not left to the union to communicate that. You do that communication, because the union communication will invariably be hyperbolic and unhelpful.
Yeah.
But when you then come to communicate the final thing, you've had maybe 6 or 7 negotiated times where people are up to speed on what's happening. And then you present a deliberate table that you take people through slowly at various town hall type meetings, where you go through the changes one by one and what it actually means, and you monetize it where it's relevant to people and say, so for the classifications of people in the room, the effect of this is to increase you by $3 an hour, which over a payroll period would be X.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, I think sometimes people get scared that, oh, you're going to take away something, so you don't want to flag it. But if you kind of come with clean hands and show people all of it, then you can kind of show them the narrative that overall it is better, because it has to be anyway. You have to pass the boot.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and look, the other part is you should have been, and when we do enterprise agreements, we like to pick it up 12 months, 18 months beforehand to start communicating the business logic. So the same thing isn't said every time. These are tight times and therefore we've got to cut, because employees after a while get tired of the same stories. So what you're selling in the build-up is, as we deliver our services, the things that are critical to us are flexibility, and in any forward negotiation, obviously we're going to meet higher wage expectations, but we're going to need this support from you. So as most people are driven by a productive outcome, if they can understand how it delivers a better service to clients or to whoever it is, they understand it works better for the business. They won't say no if it takes away a part of what they are, so long as they can see at the end of it that they'll receive an entitlement which is greater overall than what they had before, and they are allowed to have some ownership in the change. But the problem in negotiations is it's presented as a them and us thing.
Yeah.
So the employer is seen as responding to the union rather than having their own story, and then allow the union to communicate what is wrong with it. And then just before people vote, the employer gets up and says it's all great. And as a result of that, you get these deliberate miscommunications. It's a sell. It's an attempt of selling something which isn't true. And it's not surprising at all. The Fair Work Commission just goes, no.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's a good story and it's a good illustration of when things go wrong.
Yeah, because now they have to redo the whole process again.
I know. And Nina told me to say all those things just to demonstrate what we do well. Okay.
I'm on to the main topic.
Yeah, culture is king. I normally say cash is king, but that's because I'm in business. But culture is king.
Cash is king.
Channel 9, all of us, everyone who's listening knows the story of Channel 9. I'm not here to prosecute Channel 9. But we have seen a cultural failing from the very top of an organisation. And there are some simple truths around culture. One is, if leaders misbehave, the behaviour of those beneath will be worse, not better. In other words, so if I'm rude, Nina will be very rude.
Yeah, because it's accepted behaviour.
Yeah, it's authorised behaviour. In fact, it's actually encouraged behaviour.
Yeah.
And what was seen in Channel 9 is encouraged behaviour, the authorisation of a very muscular male culture, which is rude, abrupt and sexualised.
And there was a lot of bullying and power imbalances and stuff like that.
So, okay, we've got that. So why are we talking about this today when you know that? I guess the answer is there is a terrible misconception and misuse of cultural views and investigations. So if we just go through safety law, very simple terms. In safety law, once you identify a hazard, you have to determine its risk. Okay, this is reasonable practicability. And from there, you've got to introduce a control that is relevant to that risk. But we saw in Channel 9 and so many people who fear reputational damage and forget about their own employees in the process of doing it, that they use the investigation as actually a control.
Yeah.
And it is never, ever, ever a control. It is always an assessment of risk.
Yeah, it's the first step.
Yeah, so, and what's happened in Channel 9, as happens so often, is they've thought, God, we need to put a lid on this. Let's investigate. Let's tell people we're listening to them. We're going to do an investigation. And they think that's where it ends. But the answer is, when you deliver the outcome of the investigation, and there's 27 findings, and they are just terrible findings, you don't have a strategy. You leave this hole, this gap, this lacuna sitting in the middle of, oh, so we've got all these problems and we've got nothing to do with them. Oh, but now we're going to take action. And then over a 3-month period, we're going to sack this person, we're going to just, it's what I call witch burning. We're going to go out and kill people just to say, see, we did it. Look, we did one over there, in the hope that everyone goes, oh, we've burned enough witches now. Yeah, okay, that's all good. We can stop. We can go back to being who we are. But this behaviour represents the culture that's criticised.
Yeah.
So before you do an investigation, you do want to know what it's likely to say, and you do want to have a strategy to manage it immediately and say, look, we've got these findings today. They do come as a shock to us, but already we've started to do the following things. And to the people who've been hurt, we can only apologise, and we will be reaching out to heal. We will be coming to you. You can trust us that this is not where we wanted to be. None of that communication has happened.
Exactly.
So these people feel vindicated. And since then, more very distressing complaints have been made. So it just keeps burning Nine's reputation, which means no talent will go towards it.
Yeah.
They will lose talent and institutional
knowledge. And lose existing
knowledge.
people, yeah.
And on top of that, there's going to be significant litigation at some stage which will flow out of it, because plaintiff lawyers will see
and use this report.
They've just used the report. So can you see how dangerous it is when you take something which is meant to be a risk process, think it's a control? In safety terms, it's not. In employment law, it's not. Industrially, it's not. Discrimination law, it's not. But worst of all, reputationally, it is petrol just waiting to be lit.
Yeah, but also from like a safety and employment law perspective, I think if you don't have anything in place before this, then you're already in breach of your positive duties. Like, you shouldn't have to wait to get to the stage of a cultural review to identify that there are problems. There should be mechanisms in place for people to feel comfortable to raise concerns and that they're promptly addressed. And it can be harder with a bigger organisation, but that's one of the points of leadership, right?
Yeah, no, and then that's what I'm saying. The idea of having the investigation and thinking that it was some
like magical solution,
some panacea for complaints, reflects, ironically, the very culture that is complained about. To think that I can have an investigation and that'll make everyone feel better. All it does is leave the patient open on the operating table. And the doctor just walked out of the room. So you've got everyone bleeding and no surgery's been done and no one's been stitched up.
Yeah, like so you realise how bad the disease is, but you're like, oh, it's too big for me.
Yeah, and then just walk away. So I've raised it not to criticise Channel 9, because Channel 9's not alone in this problem. But the decision-making they came from a muscular place of almost paternalistic process. Well, if we investigate, people will feel better. I can tell you they don't. Well, on to the main topic. What an exciting
case study.
Case study. And what an exciting case study it is. It's a long one today too.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Neo felt he was being taken down the rabbit hole by his micromanaging boss, John Smith. He was confused about what was expected of him and felt constant pressure to meet deadlines, commitments, and directions, with John often descending into the minutiae of each task he required of Neo. John felt that Neo was out there and not a team player. He asked the HR manager, Gloria Foster, to intervene. Gloria spoke to Neo briefly over cookies and coffee, explaining that he was not the one to lead. It was John, and he needed to meet with her and John to work through the issues. She arranged to facilitate a meeting with them and explained to Neo that it was part of a counselling process for him. At the facilitated meeting, things went badly. John was accusatory while Neo was evasive and said he felt unsafe through the process. Shortly after the meeting, Neo spoke to his work colleague.
Has anyone worked out this is the matrix yet? I just thought
about the meeting and why it occurred in breach of his confidentiality obligations under the policies dealing with counselling and discipline. He confided in his close friend Trinity, stating that he did not feel safe with John and felt threatened. He believed his workplace was unsafe. As the meeting was breaking up, John arrived in the tea room where they had been discussing Neo's concerns. John asked why everyone was in the tea room when it was not a break time. Neo replied, "We were discussing some concerns of mine." Neo, who was angry with John's intervention and attitude, went further. He said, "John, it is like you are from some other planet. Oh my God. You have no idea about the impact of your behaviour on others." John was not pleased. He spoke in a deliberate and cool voice to Neo. It is not appropriate for you to speak to me like that in these circumstances. Let's speak privately. Neo smiled and said, what does it matter where we speak? You would just bully and push me around to try and get your way. Trinity quickly ran to the phone and spoke with the head of operations, explaining what had occurred, and Neo's concerned. She said to leave it with her. John lodged a formal complaint with HR, alleging that Neo had breached the code of conduct by colluding with others to undermine his authority, spoke rudely and offensively to him in a manner that breached their value of respect, and deliberately cultivated a rebellious attitude with his work group to the detriment of the business. He claimed these breaches constituted serious misconduct. An investigation revealed that Neo had raised concerns with his work group, many of whom shared his apprehensions about John's demeanour and intervention. Nonetheless, it found that John had acted properly and that Neo's conduct breached policies regarding counselling and discipline, the code of conduct, and organisational values. Oh gosh, the investigator Ben Cipher made no inquiry into Neo's knowledge or awareness of the documents he was said to have breached. Neo had not seen any of the relevant documents and had never been inducted or trained on any. Cipher's finding of serious misconduct led to Neo's summary dismissal by the head of operations, Megan Smith. Megan was aware of Neo's concerns, believed he was a troublemaker, and thought it best to act swiftly.
There you go.
Gosh, that was a mouthful.
There's a lot, wasn't it? I wrote that very early this morning again. When you write on the screen, you're doing an email, it seems quite short. When you see it on there, it's very long.
I can confirm the email was not short.
Okay, the email was not short. Did Neo commit misconduct, and was it serious?
Misconduct, yes, he did.
He did. I think he did.
Yeah,
I think being rude in front of...
and actively being, what's that word? But undermining, basically.
Yeah. So he involved in gossip and discussions around issues that he felt he was wrong by. It's not good behaviour. It's sort of low-level misconduct, and it's common. And sometimes you've got to understand counselling was not a bad decision about that sort of stuff. Feeling threatened by John and saying some of the things he did out loud, I think his conduct was on the low level of misconduct, but it was definitely misconduct, but definitely not serious misconduct.
Yeah, like people can make complaints, but you're not supposed to foster a negative environment.
Yeah. Could Neo brought a successful workers' compensation claim prior to termination of his employment, and why?
Yeah.
There's absolutely no doubt.
Due to John's treatment of him.
Yeah, that's right. So
and then the way that they handle it as well.
The whole way they handle it. And the investigation by Cipher, not a good investigation. Did Neo encounter any psychological hazards under safety law, and if so, what? And I think we just talked about what they were. You know, the lack of process, the lack of fairness, the lack of proper allegations.
Lack of support.
So let's go back on the allegations. The allegations are not ones which are articulated in a way which could have been responded to. And there's no evidence that the evidence is mainly coming from John as to what is wrong, except for the admissions of wrongdoing. The rest of it, the impressionistic stuff that was relied on for serious misconduct, which elevated from misconduct to serious misconduct, there is no evidence there. So in the cases we've talked about today, it was a deeply flawed process, and that, along with the micromanaging and other issues that have been raised, are all psychological hazards. And remember, with psychological hazards, the impact of psychological hazards is very simple. They are always cumulative. It's not usually one on their own. So to the question number 2, could you bring a claim? Yes, if there was psychological injury. Clearly, no, if there's not. But the process of performance management was deeply flawed. So let's try the next question.
Could Neo bring an unfair dismissal claim?
I think it's a hands down. There's no proper process there. And the courts that we've been showing you over the last 6 weeks show, given the nature of the misconduct being low and the flaws,
it was very low.
Now if it was very high, if he had a punch John,
I think
the lack of process wouldn't have mattered
fine,
as much. Could Neo bring a successful general?
Also, the policies, he wasn't trained on them.
Yeah, I know. I did put that. Yeah, we both think that's a nonsense. Anyway, but it's true. If someone couldn't have known, and in this case,
because it was low level.
The confidentiality part, I think, is a really good example, because he wouldn't know as he walked out of a meeting that he couldn't talk about it. So he'd need to know about that sort of stuff. Yeah. All right. Could Neo bring a successful general protections claim? And I think the final words from Megan Smith, also known as Mega Smith in Trinity, in the Matrix, are a total giveaway, because he's a troublemaker. He's raising complaints. Let's just get rid of him.
And get rid of him swiftly.
Swiftly, yeah. Well, there you go. There we are. I can tell you, Nina and I have put in hours learning today, as you can tell by our gaps in knowledge. We're sitting in a coffee shop across the road going, what do you think about that? Drawing parallels to our own life. I think we've got it. Let us know if we've got away. Give us a thumbs up.
See you next time.
See you later. Bye-bye.